So the first speaker that we're going to have this morning is Colonel Tom Lesperance. Colonel Lesperance is the director of the Vermont State Police. He is also the one of the deputy directors of the Department of Public Safety. Throughout his career, he served not only on the uniform side, but also in the detective side, with a great deal of his career being dedicated to drug interdiction and drug work. He serves on national committees through the IACP, and it's actually some of the things that he learns on those committees and some of the courses and some of the experiences he has on those national committees end up helping the people of Vermont, and he brings them back and puts them to use here. So Colonel Lesperance.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I appreciate those kind words. I will say, I'll make a statement real quick. I had an excellent weekend, and I'm pretty confident not one person in this room really cares, but I went down to Boston and picked up my daughters for spring break, and they actually still like hanging out with their parents. So we spent the weekend in Boston, and on Sunday evening traveled back, and that's why I want to talk about my weekend for a moment. We reached the Hooksett toll booth, and we noticed the southbound traffic was backed up for 7 miles to thereabouts to I-89. I know that traffic traveling down 93 is normally related to Loon Mountain, North Conway, and places north of the Boston area where people go skiing and spend their weekends during the winter. The refreshing news was when I pulled onto I-89, there was a backup there as well that clearly told me it was coming from Vermont. That sign right there scares me to death. I think overnight, Vermont potentially has lost its stamp as the cheddar cheese and maple syrup capital of the world to become that heroin mecca. And I am deeply concerned about that. The national media has picked up heavily on the governor's State of the State's address, and I will say that I was impressed with the governor's State of the State address. It brought together people in this room. It ripped the lid off the conversation that we tried to keep under the wraps for years. We had a tendency to blame people from out of state for our problem, and that instant that the governor put that out there, the national media picked up on it. Rolling Stone magazine was embedded with one of our drug task force supervisors. I expect a story to come out in that magazine soon. The New York Times has done some work that clearly paints a picture that none of us really like to read about or see, but there it is, it's in our face. Sam Hemingway of the Burlington Free Press has been on this issue for years. For those that have been reading his stories and as it relates to OxyContin and opiates, Sam's been all over this. It's been there, but we've always had this tendency to push this subject, in my world anyhow, and I'm looking at all the police officers in the room and all of us that have worked the road over the years. It was that out-of-state drug deal. It was that problem, out-of-state coming into our state. But yet we have the problem. The demand is here. The want, the need, the addiction, it's here in Vermont. And we play such a crucial role at the tip of the spear, police officers especially in the room, but all of us, the treatment side of the house. And I'll talk a bit about prevention in a moment. I like to work that into every time I speak about this subject because I can't emphasize the importance of prevention enough, but there's something different about somebody that we stop that's in the commission of a felony. Judges see it, prosecutors read about it and see it and have to prosecute those cases, but roadside, when you stop someone that's in the commission of a felony, whether if it was Michael Jakes being stopped in the before, during, or after the murder of Brooke Bennett, a motor vehicle was involved. O'Hagan case, a motor vehicle was involved. Every high-profile homicide, domestic violence case, burglary, bad check, trafficking of heroin, a motor vehicle is involved. We're here today, Drug Driving Summit, to speak about our interactions roadside, but that motor vehicle and the people that behave behind the wheel and the passengers that are in the vehicle act different than those that aren't committing felonies. So we have to train and understand the types of questions that we ask and the responses that we receive, both verbally and non-verbally, are going to dictate which direction we go in. At the same time, we have to keep into consideration the clock is ticking very loud when we have a car stopped roadside. And the rights of those that are in the vehicle have to be preserved the entire time. Every question that we ask that gives us the ability to ask the next question slows the clock down a bit, may start the clock over again, but we have to be cognizant of that. We have to train, we have to understand our biases, we have to understand everything that we bring to the table in this position of power that we have just by wearing the uniform, carrying the gun and the badge. When we stop someone roadside, we have to have all these things in mind. We've quickly become roadside, we've become people that have to be very quick on our feet, very quick on our feet. So the core mission of the state police, the backbone of the state police, are the troopers that work the road. There's no two ways about it. And the important role that they play in combating drug driving and drunk driving and reducing crashes and things like that. Yet we've become bigger in this fight against heroin, in this fight against opiates. One of the unintended consequences, and I give credit to Dr. Roberts, who's in here somewhere. I know I talked to him earlier. You will be hearing from him a little bit later on. One of the unintended consequences of the prescription drug monitoring program was it kind of slowed down the opiate side of the house as far as pills go and distribution, and it increased the heroin side because the addict now can't get the pill on the street as easily as they can get heroin. The price of heroin, as we know, has dropped significantly in Vermont, significantly to the point where we're almost at the same price that we can find it in the cities. So what do? We still have these discussions at the legislature, and I applaud the efforts of some of the bills that go through. Some of the other bills I kind of shake my head because I think we're spinning our wheels. We can increase the penalty for trafficking to 1 million years and life in prison and a death penalty, and it's not going to stop the person from trying to make a dollar bringing it up to Vermont. Yet we still go down that road. The difference between the trafficker and the distributor now. It used to be the person that left Vermont to go down for their own habit, to feed their own habit, would come back up. There was a side of us that felt that, okay, that person has to go down there to feed their own habit. And I understand the addiction part of this, but we looked at them differently than we did those that just waited in Vermont for the drug to arrive. We gave them almost a pass in some respects because they were just feeding their habit. But now the trafficker is the person that comes into Vermont for the sole purpose of making money. There's no two ways about it. And again, Dr. Roberts, you said this, that the only two people that are really not making anything off of this heroin addiction are the puppy farmer and the addict. Everybody in between is making a buck somehow. And I can't agree with you more. The person or the individuals or the groups that come out of the source cities, the traditional source cities that we're all used to hearing about on the road and in the courthouse, are here to make money, and lots of money. Then there's the distributors, the downgrade from the trafficker that I look at. For those that used to leave Vermont to go get 50 bags or 100 bags are now coming back with 500 bags, 1,000 bags, not uncommon at all. And you've been reading about it in the paper, and a lot of things you haven't read about yet, you will. Some of the traffic stops, the increase in the amount, 1,000 bags, 1,500 bags. It is a game changer for us. It has changed significantly over the last few years, 2 years, 3 years in particular. We are doing everything we can overtly and covertly, I assure you. You've read also about these sweeps that have taken place with the Drug Task Force and the state, county, and local officers that work collectively on the mobile enforcement team to address this issue. We've had tremendous success across the state with these sweeps. And what those sweeps, I believe, have done has allowed the governor to talk about this issue throughout his entire State of the State address. It ripped the lid off of it, as I mentioned. Some of the things, the collateral things that we didn't expect from these sweeps were people checking themselves into the emergency room because they can't find any dope on the street. That's maybe their first introduction to health care right there. People turning themselves into the police station that weren't actually wanted as part of the sweep. That's always a plus for the cops when they show up on their own and give themselves up, but they did that as well. But what we don't know about are the dinner conversations, or some of the conversations that took place at the homes of those that weren't arrested. The friends of those arrested were on the front page of the news or on channel 3, 5, and 44. Loved ones could now look and say, I know you're hanging with that person, so you must have a problem. So there's an opportunity there to have that conversation. Because those conversations don't come easy in families that have addiction. I know that. Those conversations can take place and should take place when the opportunity presents itself. As a father of two, drug-free daughters, as far as I know. I left the house at 8 o'clock this morning. I hope they don't have a habit now. I think I was still in bed when I left, so I think I'm safe. But worked very hard. My wife and I worked very hard, and their friends and the family and everyone else worked very hard to ensure that they stayed straight. And when that opportunity presented itself in my house, and I didn't bring it home every night, I can tell you right now, the last thing my daughters wanted to hear about was cop talk every night at dinner. But when the Channel 3 or 5 or one of the stations or the other media was picking up on it, we take that opportunity and talk about that. And I hope that some of that has taken place with these sweeps. I think that it has. That's something that you really can't measure. When someone doesn't show up at rehab or doesn't end up in the ME's office, because you can't count that person. But there are countless people out there that were affected by the efforts of law enforcement in this room, and those that aren't here that work in the drug task force and work the road, that had a positive effect. But now, here we are. Here we are with treatment folks, prevention folks, all of us at the same table with an equal voice, that we can speak from experience, we can speak collectively as a group, understanding the impacts that addiction has on not just the families, but the community. The collateral damage that goes with it when your car's broken into, when your home's broken into, and when your son or daughter comes home with acting different, or their friends are acting different. It's going to put this issue where it should be, which is on the front page. We have to turn the tide a bit, though. I think we're concentrating too much on what the impact it has on Vermont. When I see that sign, that's what I think people from out of state are going to stop believing. You know, and I appreciate why it's here today, of course. But when people start thinking like that, will it affect tourism? Will it affect real estate? Will it affect business? And law enforcement in the room plays a huge role, because we are at the tip of the spear, and we will address this. We're not going to push it back into the shadows. We have to put it right out there to keep the conversation alive. But when guys like Bob Bick, Dr. Roberts, the Department of Health, and others are all getting at the table together on Wednesday, I have a meeting with that group to begin the next phase of this process. And the next phase, I hope, concentrates on prevention. Sometimes I think when you get to treatment, it's too late. I know this, that law enforcement is the #1 referral to drug rehab. We play such an important role in this, I can't overstate that. We have to continue our efforts, yet those that don't get arrested, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. I know there's people in my life that I wish were arrested, they'd still be here today. The prevention people, I think, play the biggest role. And this is where I drift off a bit, because I've never been a teacher. I've never been, the only time I spent 3 years in 8th grade math, so that's the most time I spent in junior high. But we have to focus, and I think we have to begin our focus at the earliest stages. And those that know children better than I, as far as the psychological growth and things like that, will have a better answer. But if we put something together from 1st grade right up through high school, similar to the way we teach English and math and other subjects, that has a track that continues to progress through all these stages of their life. If they're not getting this conversation at home, they're going to get it in school, and perhaps they bring that conversation from school back home, and then it starts the bigger conversation with their family. So I hope, and I'll do whatever I can, and we'll do whatever we can to support that prevention piece, because we're not going to put ourselves out of business. This legalization discussion, I love to be a part of it, just to listen, because I want to hear what both sides has to say, but I don't believe that's even close to the answer. I'm not talking just about marijuana or drugs in general, but we'll be at the table. For those that are working the road, I see plenty of uniforms in here. Some of us are a little longer in the tooth, yet still wearing the uniform. I see some younger troopers and officers in the room that are still working the road and out there every day and every night. I thank you, and I thank your families for everything that you give to this state. And I hope that we give it back to you in the form of support and everything that you need to continue to do your job. But with that said, Ted, I am so happy to be here today. I think you can see that and feel it, I hope. I think this is the most important subject, and probably the biggest crisis facing our children today is this. You know, this is, I balance it with the word disease. I have trouble sometimes putting disease and addiction in the same sentence for personal reasons and other reasons. But if that's what it takes to have the discussion about addiction, when someone wakes up in the morning, that's all they think about, their next high, and that's how they're going to get there, I guess that's a disease. And if we can have the people in this room, prevention, treatment, and others that can help people through that crisis and help their families get to where they need to be and become productive members of society, we're going to be a much better state. So With that said, I think I've taken my time, Ted, and I appreciate the time that you've given me, so thank you.